This is the Nations Conspire channel. Welcome to today's show. While people are distracted by the government-created order out of chaos events that are occurring around the United States of America, all of these curfews, all of these riots and these protests that have clearly been mapped out strategically by your own government, but they want you to believe that it's organically occurring, well, you can look no further than to where these events actually get organized and where the nations actually conspire, because the Bilderberg meetings are taking place starting today, June 12th, through June 15th in Sweden. And for those of you that don't know about the Bilderberg meeting, well, this is one of their big annual events that they hold. Many people think about the Bohemian Grove and forget about the Bilderberg meetings and think about the World Economic Forum meetings in Davos. But always remember that the Bilderberg meetings, even according to misinformation like Wikipedia, openly admits that it's an annual off-the-record forum, which was established in 1954. So who's meeting, talking about things off the record? Well, it's the richest people in the world. It's the heads of corporations, the heads of media, the heads of the banks, the heads of big tech companies, and of course, politicians from all around the earth, all meeting for an annual off-the-record event. So I couldn't imagine what they might possibly be talking about. Could they be conspiring since it's an off-the-record event and all they tell you are a few of the bullet points, which I'll get into later in the video, so we could see what they're actually plotting and planning for the rest of the world moving forward in 2025, as if we haven't seen enough chaos already. And let me read a quick little tidbit from an article out there about the actual annual Bilderberg meeting. So it's kicking off in Sweden on Thursday, providing a private forum for discussion at a time when President Trump has upended security and economic ties between the U.S. and Europe. The high-level networking event, which was formed in 1954 to foster dialogue between the U.S. and Europe. They claim it does not invite media, and delegates rarely speak about what has been discussed, triggering numerous conspiracy theories about their aims. And of course, they say it does not invite media, but then when you look at the people who are attending, you have the heads of the New York Times, you have the heads of The Economist, all these publications out there that obviously produce deliberate misinformation and then silence the rest of us from questioning what they're actually meeting about. So NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, and Christopher Donahue, commander of the U.S. Army Europe and Africa, are among those on this year's delegate list. And I'll get into more of the members in a minute. But Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson will give a speech on Sweden's and the EU's competitiveness and Sweden's support for Ukraine. Yeah, I'm sure they're all flying there together. All these people from the heads of all these corporations are flying there because they want to hear the Swedish Prime Minister give a speech about Sweden's support of Ukraine, right? The transatlantic relations top the agenda, with Ukraine, critical raw materials, and AI also on the list. The organizers, who also published the names of the participants, said, other than that, information is scarce. The organizers say the secrecy is to allow participants to be able to speak freely in an environment of trust. Well, what would they be nervous about? What do they need secrecy for to speak freely? You mean because you don't want the rest of the world to hear the things that all these big banks, big members of media, big tech are talking about in a room where they're all meeting together, right? Yeah, I'm sure the organizers say the secrecy will give them all the ability to speak freely because they're real nervous to speak openly in front of everybody else. I wonder why. What are they hiding from the rest of the world? It goes on to say, there's no desired outcome, there's no closing statement, there's no resolutions proposed or votes taken, and the meeting does not support any political party or viewpoint. That's because there is no real political party. These people have obviously created the illusion of Republicans and Democrats and parties that are opposing one another, but these people all obviously mingle in the same parties because it's really one big party, and the whole purpose of these parties that they create are to keep the people divided amongst one another. How much impact groups like Bilderberg actually have is hard to judge, according to Christina Gartson, professor at the Swedish Collegium for Advanced Study, who studies transnational think tanks. The aim is to shape the broad political and corporate agenda, but if they are seen as having too much influence, they could be accused of being anti-democratic. They go on to say, It's there that conspiracy theories can flower, but she dismissed the belief held by some groups like Bilderberg make up a shadowy world government. I think it's very much exaggerated, right? Spoken like a true sheeple, or actually somebody who is in the inner circle, who is trying to hide and protect the things that all of these people of high positions of power are meeting and conspiring about. And that's really the definition of conspire. That's the definition. Make secret plans jointly to commit an unlawful or harmful act. Well, they're making plans secretly and jointly, right? Events or circumstances seem to be working together to bring about a particular result, typically to someone's detriment. And as David Rockefeller even said at the Bilderberg meetings from a leaked recording from many years ago, he talked about how the media helped bring forward and will help bring forward this world government.
At a 1991 closed-door meeting of fellow internationalists, billionaire and former CFR chairman David Rockefeller praised his media allies, but his confidence that his words would not leave the room was later broken.
We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other publications whose directors have attended our meetings and restricted their policies of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the frank lights of publicity. That the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government.
That these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. In short, they seek total and quiet control of the entire world.
Because that's what they're meeting and conspiring about, how to bring about a world government. Now, if we look at the attendees for this year, you will notice a couple should stand out. Alex Karp of Palantir, who obviously have been getting discussed more and more recently in regards to their connection to the Trump administration and these ICE protests that are going around the country, which are bringing in Palantir to help with digital surveillance so we can identify the immigrants who are at the event. Other attendees also include Peter Thiel from Palantir. So the two creators, of course, happen to be coincidentally attending this year's Bilderberg meeting, which is taking place at the Grand Hotel in Sweden, which happens to be owned by Jacob Wallenberg, who is a billionaire bankster. Outside, of course, the hotel, people have been putting up pictures because they have gated off the hotel, but I'm sure coincidentally there's this creepy clown outside of the hotel doing the 666 sign with its fingers, and you could notice that heart on its chest, which I've broken down before in the past, which has something to do with the loving of little girls when we all obviously exposed that pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. that you're not allowed to talk about. And again, the heart symbol has a connection to bail as well. And is it a coincidence that this hotel happens to be across the street, directly adjacent to the Grand Lodge of Freemasonry for Sweden? Well, of course it's not. So let's take a look at some of the agendas being discussed. But keep in mind that when they discuss these agendas, they give you bullet points on what the topics are. And then when you actually go back and look at some of the things that they have discussed in the past, at the time you would look at it and you'd say, I don't even know what this means. And they give you the bullet points and you go, oh yeah, something like the post-truth world. People would say, yeah, I don't know what that means in 2018. Talking about the post-truth world where people like the Clintons and Klaus Schwabs and the Peter Thiels and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Bill Gateses are attending this event. They're talking about a post-truth world in 2018. Well, how coincidental is it that we are living now in the post-truth world in 2025? Because since that point in 2018, a year or two before they planned their supposed pandemic, what has occurred? Well, free speech has been removed, and we live in a world where there is no truth anymore because all real truth gets silenced, just like all the doctors who came out and talked about the poison that people were injecting. He talked about graphene oxide, who all were removed, not only from public platforms like YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, but actually lost their practices, lost their jobs as doctors, or just the rest of us who were trying to warn regular people out there that this was a sinister plan that a bunch of people who meet in secret were attempting to pull off on the world. Yet, again, they still look at us all as conspiracy theorists. So in 2018, they were talking about the post-truth world. So let's see what they're talking about this year from June 12th to June 15th. So we have transatlantic relationship, we have Ukraine, and then interestingly enough, we have the U.S. economy. What are all these people from all these other countries coming there to talk about the U.S. economy for? You mean the U.S. economy that they plan to tank and bring to its knees to kill off the middle class? We've seen, obviously, this insane fluctuation in the stock market. But even when we don't see a fluctuation in the stock market, because the majority of us aren't invested in the stock market, we see inflation hitting unbelievable record highs. We see people who are just slowly looking at their weekly paychecks and realizing that they have nothing left over because every single thing that they're buying at the grocery store is costing them an arm and a leg. And then when they try to buy from a local farmer or somewhere else, the prices there are jacked as well because it's costing the farmer an arm and a leg to be able to farm. Everything is skyrocketing. And that's how, of course, you bring the U.S. economy to its knees. You just start jacking the price of everything little by little, whether it's 50 cents to $1. And then, of course, we see even the products that are being purchased at grocery stores putting less and less food inside of the packaging. So you're paying more for the product and you're getting less to actually consume. So the U.S. economy happens to be a talking point for all of these people who, again, remember, they're meeting together because they want to be able to speak freely in an environment of trust. So they're talking about our livelihood in America, the U.S. economy, and none of them, for the most part, the majority of these people aren't even from the United States of America, with the exception, of course, of some of these big tech giants who are doing their best to bring about a surveillance state. So we have the U.S. economy, we have Europe, the Middle East, the authoritarian axis, which refers to certain countries, often China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, forming a loose alliance. And of course, these alliances are deliberately being formed by the people who are attending these meetings, who are forming alliances, because this is just a giant game of Risk or a giant game of chess. And remember, we are indeed the pawns in the game. The defense, innovation, and resilience. And then, of course, we get artificial intelligence, deterrence, and national security, proliferation, geopolitics of energy and critical minerals. And of course, right there at the bottom, depopulation and migration, which probably will go one in the same. But they really love to talk about depopulation when they're meeting in secret, right? How many of these guys do we hear openly, from Bill Gates to Ted Turner, these billionaires? Ted Turner, formerly the owner of CNN, the fakest news network on the planet. And they've openly admitted that the biggest crisis that we have is a population crisis, that there's too many people in the world. So they're going to meet there about depopulation, but it's going to go in one ear and out everybody else's ear, because they still don't believe that there's a bunch of really, really rich people who control all the resources, who control all the media, who spend day and night making up false flags and psyops, who manufacture the news to keep you divided. They're meeting together to speak freely in an environment of trust, so they can't tell you what they're actually talking about. But they're talking about your economy, and then they're talking about depopulation. But it's a conspiracy theory, right? When people meet in secret, jointly, right? We're supposed to believe they're doing it for our benefit, right? Alex Karp is there for our benefit. Peter Thiel is there for our benefit, because they care so much about all of us. So they go and they get together and then they talk about, well, how can we make the U.S. economy better? But in fact, what you end up seeing after all these events is more and more chaos ensuing, more and more regulations being put in place, more and more laws, more and more restrictions, and of course, more and more removal of free speech, just like they said in 2018, living in the post-truth world. And that's what we're living in now. So we can look back every year after the Bilderberg meetings, and we could see how things have changed. Now, we all know about the Deagle reports and depopulation and how what the population number is supposed to be after the year 2025. And as I covered even recently, the discussion about bioweapons, the discussion about how it's not over yet. We hear whispers of more and more outbreaks. So for people out there who continually hear people like us talk, and they say we're conspiracy theorists, well, think to yourself, because the hardest part for most of these people to connect is, who are these people? Where do they meet? How do they conspire? Then you start seeing lists like what you see with the Bilderberg event. And you see all of these politicians, and then you see sprinkled in Peter Thiel, right? AI surveillance. Then you see the heads of all media in there, the New York Times, the Economist, other people like that, all sprinkled in, all meeting together. And the topics they're discussing, well, they'll give you bullet points, but they can't release anything that's said in that room. It's all private information. And that's really the definition of what conspiring is. People meeting together, conspiring to bring about what we would call unlawful or harmful acts on the rest of us. And that's how these events occur. That's how these ICE protests and riots occur. All these things that they're doing come from these think tanks that they have, but they're not really think tanks. They're large secret meetings that are held where nations conspire with one another against the civilians of the earth. So while we see all this noise going on around us, while we see all of the curfews being put in place, the National Guard potentially on the cusp here of martial law being implemented in certain states, and they show us these maps of where all these events are going to be occurring over the next couple of days. Remember that these are the places, the Bilderberg meetings, the Davos meetings, the Bohemian Grove. There are so many of these secret meetings, these summits that they have where they claim that they're just getting together to make business deals with one another, but they can't tell you what they're actually talking about because they're business deals, right? They can't put a camera in the room and let you hear what they're saying, because if you did, you would call for these people's heads on a stick. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what really occurs in this world. So we can look around us right now. We can look at this event, how coincidental it is, of course, that they're meeting right across the street from the Grand Lodge of Freemasonry in Sweden. And Lord only knows what's really occurring behind closed doors when the lights are off later in the day, because we know that these meetings carry into the night. They'll probably be in that Masonic lodge with the fake windows where nobody can look inside to see what's actually being done. And we can only pray for any of the young ones in the area over there, because of course we know that there'll be a lot of sinister deeds taking place. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families, as always.